Welcome to the very first episode of Punk Rock Politics. My name is John Smith, and I am the host of Punk Rock Politics. Real quick, I'll just say that I had a video that was very lengthy and a bunch of analysis. It was over an hour long, and it failed to upload, and I spent the better part of 5 or 6 hours trying to fix this problem on the phone with Samsung and doing research because YouTube doesn't help you out in these situations. Anyway, it's Super Tuesday, so happy Super Tuesday, everybody. This is a pivotal moment for our nation in so many ways. Obviously, you have Donald Trump as the president, and that's not good. I mean, the guy can't even handle the coronavirus. There's a laundry list of issues with Donald Trump, obviously being incompetence, dishonesty, corruption, profiting off the office, which is really what, if Democrats in power wanted to get rid of Donald Trump, they would have got rid of him for the emoluments clause in the Constitution, which says you can't profit off the office, and which he has done, and subjected poor soldiers to paying absurd amounts for hotels, and I believe it was Ireland or Scotland, and he's done a whole bunch of stuff. He's, you know, whatever. He's got dignitaries and people in power staying at his hotels for conferences and his different resorts, and there's just a big pay-to-play kind of thing going on and just profiting. Nonetheless, we're going to get into the Super Tuesday, the DNC, or Democratic National Committee, the Democratic primary. It's Super Tuesday, so 14 states are up for grabs, and also, sorry, I'm blanking. It's been a long day. Oh God, I can't believe one of the islands. It's evading my memory. It'll come to me. I apologize. But 40%. The point is, 40% of the delegates are up for grabs. It's funny. I actually turned on Fox News over here. It's the closed captioning's on. I did so because the coverage was so horrible, and there was so much propaganda on CNN and MSNBC trying to create this narrative that Joe Biden is the best candidate to beat Trump. They lied so many times, it's absurd. And I'm talking about actual data and statistics. So please use the internet to challenge something you hear and verify things. Don't just listen to one source. And sometimes if you see MSNBC, CBS, ABC, NBC, and most of these companies are all owned by the same companies. CNN, all these people saying the same thing, it doesn't mean it's true. So you need to find independent media, and that's one of the reasons I'm here. I would like to give a shout out to other YouTubers who have influenced me and who have brought independent media and analysis back to politics. You have The Rational National. Please check them out. Just amazing stuff. Secular Talk with Kyle Kulinski. And Kyle Kulinski helped get progressives in the House of Representatives elected, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC as she's known, and many others, and also the Humanist Report and the Jimmy Dore Show. I believe his little flag on YouTube is TJDS. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to get into something really quick. This video was supposed to go out like 4 or 5 hours ago. Had a big problem, so I'm going to try to condense a bunch of stuff in a very small period of time and get it up. Anybody in Super Tuesday states who can volunteer or donate or get on social media and change the media narrative, which is it's just complete lies and disingenuous nonsense, for Bernie Sanders, do so. Now, I do support Bernie Sanders anytime that Bernie Sanders does or says something wrong, or that is in poor tact, or just a poor strategy. I will definitely hold the fire to his feet, so to speak. I won't let that go. But in this case, in Las Vegas, in the Las Vegas debate, Chuck Todd asked the candidates on stage, and the media has not done a good job of talking about the brevity of this, the how important it is. Every candidate besides Bernie Sanders And if memory serves me, they were Tom Steyer, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, and of course Bernie Sanders. But every candidate on that stage, besides Bernie Sanders, said that we should wait for the convention, the DNC convention, the DNC 2020 primary, to decide, quite frankly, who the nominee is, and that the person with the most votes should not be the nominee. That superdelegates, which there is approximately, I believe the number is 771 to be exact. These are people in power in the Democratic Party who, if nobody gets a majority of the votes in the first round, meaning 50% of all the delegates from each state, not from each state, but 50% of the delegates from all the states and territories combined, then that person, could get the nomination taken away by a bunch of different other contenders who combine the delegates to have a larger lead and have super delegates. Now, these are delegates come from votes. Super delegates are just party elites who pick and choose anybody they want, regardless of how their state voted or any other metric of reasonability, any kind of democratic metric. So what the people on stage were saying, which is Tom Steyer, who has now dropped out of the race, Pete Buttigieg dropped out, I believe it was 2 nights ago, and last night endorsed Joe Biden along with Amy Klobuchar and Beto O'Rourke, who has long been out of the race. Amy Klobuchar obviously dropped out, as I said, sorry, so those people are out of the race. Wanted to cover that, but them along with Joe Biden, Michael Bloomberg, who I left out because he's not a Democrat or anything close, and he shouldn't even be in this race. He's trying to buy his way into this race. I forgot about him. And Elizabeth Warren, who is also still in the race, along with Joe Biden and Bloomberg, said, forget democracy, forget who the people vote for, forget all their time, their money, their emotion, their effort, their activism, their suffering. Because that's what this comes down to in a lot of ways. People are suffering. Forget all of that. We get to pick. Party elites get to pick who the nominee is. So pretty much everybody on stage says we don't believe in democracy, and this vote is a sham if Bernie Sanders can't get 50 votes. Now, it used to be worse. Superdelegates could pick in the first round. Bernie Sanders changed that in 2016. He tried to fight to get rid of superdelegates. The compromise was that they could vote in the second round if the candidate does not get 50% of the delegates at the national convention. Still an absurd proposition that they could do that, and it's clearly undemocratic. But if you're wondering, well, Bernie Sanders is an independent. He was the longest independent House representative, and he's an independent senator, and he's been in, I believe, since 2012 in the Senate. If you're wondering, well, I'm sorry, not 2012. I apologize. That was infactual. 2006. Yeah, I believe it was 2006 or 2008. He got elected to the Senate after being in the House for a long time. Anyway, the point is that, first of all, let's get to what the narrative is in the media. Joe Biden won his first primary ever, and he's run for office at least 2 or 3 times, if not more. He's run for president, not to mention other offices, obviously. He was in the Senate a long time. Obviously, he was Barack Obama's vice president, not candidate as well, but vice president for eight years, 2 terms in the White House. And he practically ran his whole campaign being like, I'm with Barack Obama. The guy is a joke. Now, I don't want to, I'm going to reserve some judgment and have some empathy later in the video and explain. But first of all, Joe Biden's policies are horrendous. So you have his Crime Bill Act, which some people say Bernie Sanders voted for. Well, Bernie Sanders protested the horrible parts of the bill, but nonetheless, and you can look at the videos, this is factual, looked up and, he voted for it because there was a Violence Against Women's Act that was part of it, which is one of the ways they dupe certain people. Mostly they were all behind it, throw a bunch of people in jail that have color or do drugs, mostly poor, not mostly, but that's who was targeted. It shows that white people do as much or more drugs than African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, etc. But they have a higher proportion rate of getting, first of all, found in the first place, arrested, charged, harassed, thrown in jail. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't happen to anybody. Regardless of race, creed, or anything else. But nonetheless, he voted for the Iraq War. He was instrumental in. I read an article a long time ago, a couple of them, but one of them was very good. I wish I can give credit to it, but it was years ago, and it exposed the fact that Joe Biden lobbied hard to get people to vote for and pass legislation that made it almost impossible for students in debt to claim bankruptcy, and he also helped push the fight to allow them to raise interest rates. Raise interest rates. The Democrat claiming he's trying to pull people out and all these nonsensical things he's saying of the struggle. He wants to go back to the way it was, which is what led to Trump, and which was, in many ways a big problem. Now, unfortunately, in a lot of ways, Barack Obama is very popular, and one of the reasons is because he's the first half-black president, or any kind of black that we know of, president to get elected. He's half black and half white, if you didn't know. Yeah, he did. I voted for him, but he didn't. He did not, come through with any of his campaign promises. He didn't put anybody in Wall Street in jail except some 28-year-old kid or something. As an example, it seems like the kid didn't even know what was going on. Maybe he was guilty, but either way, he was not the perpetrator of these crimes, and those people are still free and influencing policy and sitting in the White House, etc. Running, in different states and governors, etc. Nonetheless, criminals. He extended the Bush tax cuts. He extended the Patriot Act. He was the one who started putting whistleblowers in jail, and now Trump has gone even worse with that. Obama did a lot of horrible things. He did not address climate change significantly at all. He increased more gas and fossil fuel usage than even, I think it was like several presidents combined, even Republican presidents. But Joe Biden has a ton of issues, and one of them is the gaffes he's had. If you haven't heard of him saying crazy things, first of all, you haven't been watching the debates or paying enough attention. He had said in one of the last debates, it was either the last one or the one before that, and I was blown away by this. Again, the media is not covering it. The 150, they brought it up like once. Chris Christie, of all people, brought it up on Colbert, and I am not giving much credit to Chris Christie, but he did have some more intelligent, honest things to say about the Democratic race and Bernie Sanders and things. And he did say, did anybody catch this? And I did. Joe Biden said, well, Bernie Sanders voted against this bill, and 150 million Americans have been killed by gun violence since 2008. Maybe it was 2009 or 10, I forget. It's really not the exact point. The point is the guy said 150 million. That's right, 150 million Americans were lost to gun violence. So that's, by anybody's math, that's a little less than half of the entire United States population, which is roughly 320 million people. So he makes gaffes like this all the time. He pulls numbers out of the air. He lies. He lied about... Him and Bloomberg both lied about Michael Bloomberg, the previous mayor of New York City, who extended his term to have 3 terms in a very undemocratic fashion. I'll get into that another time. More or less like, I need another term. I like myself. There used to be term limits, two governorships for 8 years, and they said, oh, get rid of that in New York. So it was crazy. It was like an authoritarian move. But anyway, they were talking about Bloomberg's policy of stop and frisk, where people of color were disproportionately stopped in New York City and targeted and frisked and arrested and all these things, right? It was a long-term policy of Michael Bloomberg while he was in office. One of the ways Michael Bloomberg has controlled this narrative is he donates a lot of money philanthropically, but then he because he donates all this money to certain people that look into progressive policies or just independent media that investigates government or does reports. There was a recent story out where he shut down a report. I forget the name of the report, by several people who were putting together a report for years of like discriminatory and anti-constitutional acts by government in the United States. And Michael Bloomberg's whole chapter was taken out. His name was never mentioned because he donated heavily, and people were very upset that did the report naturally because they had anti-Muslim policies that were proven to be inefficient, obviously unconstitutional and just unethical, but they also were a waste of resources and produced nothing in the way of stopping any Islamic terrorism or anything like that. And And the stop and frisk policy was obviously mentioned and was taken out of this report. But on the debate stage, Bloomberg said that when he found out it was bad, he stopped 95% of the stop and frisks, which is a complete lie. And Joe Biden said that he didn't stop until Obama and him sent the federal government into New York. Also a lie. I know this because the female judge who ordered it unconstitutional and for Bloomberg to stop it, I said at one point he cut it down by like 35 or 40%. That's still, it was a huge, they were like targeting like every person of color, like roughing them up, arresting them, harassing them, and God knows how many horrible things happened and how many innocent people were put in jail, or people who had drugs who shouldn't be criminalized and put in jail. Nonetheless, they both lied about it on stage. The female judge made it was like late night, unfortunately. It wasn't made a big story. It should be a big story. They both lied blatantly. Joe Biden has lied so many times, it's disturbing. So is Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg's trying to buy his way into this race. He's not a Democrat. He doesn't caucus with the Democrats like Sanders did. He doesn't fight for Democratic or left wing, I should even say, what we're pushing for now, progressive politics. He's not fighting for anybody but himself. He lies constantly, and he should not be in this race. The Democrats were willing to change the rules to allow him to jump into one of the debates. It's absurd. They want to do anything to stop Bernie Sanders, which brings me to my point. That MSNBC and CNN right now, for the last few hours, I had it on while I was dealing with my YouTube issues, they are propagating the worst propaganda right now. It's absurd. They're saying a lot of people believe, this is what people say when they have no evidence for it. A lot of people believe that that Joe Biden is better to beat Trump, except unfortunately, if you look up the statistics, Bernie Sanders is the only candidate in the Democratic primary who is slated to beat Trump in a slew of important key states and has the best overall percentage and is either tied or beating Trump like all over the country. Bernie Sanders is winning counties. Up until a few weeks ago, he was winning every single county that voted Obama, and then Obama again, and then Trump in the whole country, save one, except one, right? Okay, so Bernie Sanders obviously has broken so many records. He's broken the amount of people that have contributed to a presidential campaign. He's broken the number by huge amounts. He's the first campaign in the United States, presidential campaign, to unionize, and he's got a lot of people coming at him. So with Buttigieg, Klobuchar, and Klobuchar dropping out and endorsing Sanders right before Super Tuesday, they're trying to give Joe Biden some steam. This is the first primary he's ever won, and MSNBC and CNN are acting like he's the savior and the most competent, like far better candidate that Bernie Sanders has. Joe Biden has no ground game. And unfortunately, a lot of people do listen to CNN, MSNBC, and other, corporate media, Fox, whatever. And if they don't directly listen to it, it does unfortunately impact the narrative and the discussion. And these people have interest in keeping a Bernie Sanders out, who is coming after the pharmaceutical industry. And mind you, all of these people pay for commercials on these industries. All of these people are putting out, they're funding, they're paying for commercials for, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, all that stuff. I will say, though, Fox can say some terrible things about Sanders and often do, but sometimes they're more fair than CNN and MSNBC. And this is, I am not saying that they do a great job of investigative journalism, that they're not pundits, too, meaning that they don't actually do deep dives and care about policy and uncovering corruption. But, that's how bad MSNBC and CNN are. And they're like letting more Sanders surrogates on, meaning MSNBC and CNN, but they're doing it in a way that's disingenuous, and when it really comes down to it, it's an all-out media blitz against Sanders. So they're saying that Biden has the black vote. Correction, Biden had the black vote in South Carolina so far, which was 70% of the voters were over 65 in that state for the primary, this recent primary. Okay, Bernie Sanders is actually leading, killing it in the youth black vote and the youth vote in general. Under 45 is the strongest thing. But also, Joe Biden put all of his money into South Carolina. He had to win South Carolina. That's all he did. He's still got no funding, no campaign, no volunteers, nobody showing up to rallies. Bernie Sanders had 20,000 people in Los Angeles. He's had numbers like that, and between three, where people in Iowa were getting like 100 or 20 people, or like some pathetic number. Where it was Klobuchar, with some of these people, even Warren. Warren had a couple of strong showings in Iowa, I believe, but Bernie Sanders had the biggest, and he gets the most supporters to come out for him. They really care about what he has to say, and that's because he's, again, the only person on the stage that said he believes in democracy out of all of the other people running in the Democratic primary. Now, Elizabeth Warren, we'll get to that real quick. Elizabeth Warren has stabbed Bernie Sanders in the back so many times. I quite frankly don't know how he tolerates it. Now, his campaign, Bernie Sanders' campaign, has a strategy of attacking policy, not candidates. For a long time, Bernie Sanders was the number 2 option of Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, and I believe like flopping back and forth between second and third for Klobuchar. I could be wrong about Klobuchar. Maybe it was third and fourth, but he was a second choice candidate for Biden and Buttigieg. Now, it doesn't make any sense if you understand policy or record or anything like that, or personality, level of integrity, that kind of stuff. But nonetheless, a lot of voters, unfortunately, don't, look up people's records, which I strongly encourage you to do. Look up people's records. The government has websites where you could find out every single bill that was voted for, by anybody in government, if a congressman or senator. Congress is both houses, but that's how they say. Somebody in the House of Representatives, somebody in the Senate, or even a president. You could look up their record. Is the point? Use the internet for something good, not to talk just about tacos and how you got a great shirt or a jacket or something. But yeah, so Sanders. Sorry, excuse me a second. Give me a second to gather my thoughts. Let me grab a drink real quick, if that's okay, people. Oh. Okay. So, where was I? Where was I indeed? Now, Bernie Sanders. Let's just go right here. That's where I was getting to. Bernie Sanders encouraged Elizabeth Warren to run in 2016. He said, "This is your time. You could beat Clinton. You could beat Trump. Go, go, go." They're supposed to be friends, or at least somewhat closer on ideology, right? So Senator Warren says no. Now, I don't know what her reasoning was, or if it's legitimate or not, or if she had some personal stuff going on, wasn't ready, or my opinion is it was most likely calculative and calculated. So here she is running now. Now, Elizabeth Warren has broken a ton of campaign promises and has been caught lying so many times. It's disturbing. Now, I understand a lot of people out there, they want a woman to be president. And I'm not against a woman being president. I just personally chose not to vote for the stinkers and corrupt politician or businessman of Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, 2 most unpopular candidates in history. I know people are going to their ideological fences and defending an awful, idiotic president like Trump, and were unfairly biased and stole the primary from Bernie Sanders in 2016. And people should have stood up, and we should have millions in the street. We have 320 million people. 1% of that is 3.2 million, 10% is 32 million. I said we get 10% or more out in the streets if they try to steal it again, and we demand democracy. And this means even if you don't like Bernie Sanders or you hate him, it doesn't really matter. The reason people were pissed in 2016 is because 2 million ballots in California were provisional and given out to voters and directed by the DNC. They were given out to people who voted for independent or progressive candidates in the past, and essentially Bernie Sanders voters. When I should interrupt this thought just to say, anybody out there, please make phone calls, send text messages, go all over social media, talk to people in the streets, wear signs, shirts, Bernie, Bernie, get out there. I am independent, and I'm not telling you who to vote for. I want everybody to go out and vote, regardless of who you're voting for, and I really do mean that. Fortunate for me, if everybody went out and voted like they should, the youth, Gen Z, millennials, Bernie Sanders would kill it overwhelmingly, and that's the problem, is we're not getting enough people in these primaries. So a lot of states have confining rules of how to vote. I'm unfortunately forget or didn't, can't recall sites that are like not political for a political party, but there's something called, I think it's Vote For, and I mean spelled out, FOR, voteforbernie.org. And regardless of whether you're voting for Sanders, the point is that it tells you if you're an independent candidate or if you're not registered, the time before the primary that you would need to register in your state, and if you would need to register for that party, meaning in this case the Democratic Party, in order to vote for Bernie Sanders. And please do that. So even if you're not voting for Sanders, voteforbernie.org still will tell you when you need to register for. And I'm sure there's other sites, but that's just the one I know right now, that my friend asked me for and I sent to him. He specifically asked me for Bernie, so I looked it up, and that's the reason I know that one. Anyway, so Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders decided to run in 2016, getting back to what we were talking about. That was just really important. Probably should have said that in the beginning of the video. Also, I don't know if I mentioned the intro song was my song, my punk rock music. I did some stuff here and there as the death of John Smith, but never really went through with it, and would love to, get back into music. Could really use a good bass player and drummer at the least. I could say that. Anyway, I sing, play guitar, and write lyrics and stuff. So write the music. So Bernie Sanders ran in 2016 because Elizabeth Warren did not run. Okay, right? So fast forward to this primary season. Now Elizabeth Warren's running. And Elizabeth Warren no longer believes in democracy. Elizabeth Warren said she would not use super PACs. She had a super PAC in Nevada when it was obvious that she had a stinker of a showing in both the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary. So for the Nevada caucus, she had a super PAC, which is quite a shame. She also made a complete lie about Sanders and others. Well, Sanders, really, on the debate stage, one of the debates recently, one of the last 2 or 3 debates, and said that I'm the only person on the stage besides Amy Klobuchar, the 2 women who don't have a super PAC. Bernie Sanders doesn't have a super PAC. Super PAC doesn't have to declare where the money's coming from. It's very secretive. Bernie Sanders has a PAC, which is a political action committee, mostly made up of union workers, working class people, volunteers, and people that believe in progressive politics. Everybody knows where the money's coming from. It's not a ton of money. It's a movement. So she lied, point blank. Then this is before this happened, when Elizabeth Warren, remember when she was the media darling? They all wanted her because it's clear that she's willing to work and bend on her principles. She's going to raise money. She's like, I won't take money in the general election. Or she said it first. I won't take money in the general election. Now, but I will raise money for the DNC. And people said, come on, we see right through that. You're going to raise money for the Democratic National Committee. Since you're the DNC candidate, the money's going to go right back to you. It's absurd, right? And it's funny because people pointed out there's no need to raise money in the general because you'll have a ton of free media coverage, especially after what happened with the media giving so much free coverage to Trump and unfairly and unequally. We should bring back the equal coverage law. Please look into what the equal coverage law is. It pretty much just requires that people reporting news give each candidate equal time on their network. If they put one on, they should put them all. And this should include the Green Party, Libertarian Party, etc. And they should be on the debate stage. But the DNC and the RNC, as private for-profit institutions, set the standards for who can be on a presidential debate stage. I'll just throw in the fact that I think Howie Hawkins, who is running for the Green Party, I hope he gets the nomination regardless of whether he does, should look into his policies. I haven't done a deep dive to make sure he's been like a consistent and great, awesome, honest person throughout his life, but it seems that way. He's very good with political philosophy, history. He's got the right views, and I think he should be in a Bernie Sanders administration. Anyway. So Elizabeth Warren, says this lie about super PACs about Bernie. She says when she starts losing in the polls, the media, like I said, they're blowing her up. Elizabeth Warren, she's the front runner, because they were giving her so much more coverage and bashing Sanders so openly and not, paying attention to him. She went back on Medicare for All, said I'm going to do it in 2 steps. The first step is we do a single payer option to show people that this works. And the second step is 2 years later, we'll revisit it and then we'll fight and pass Medicare for all. So she's saying she's going to have two fights. And the problem is historically, after a party wins an election, whatever party that the president's in, they usually lose the worst of the whole rest of their term or two. They lose a massive election in what is called the midterm election, and the first midterm election is so 2 years after they're elected. So what Elizabeth Warren is saying and signaling to insurance companies and powerful elites in both parties, quite frankly, is that, hey, almost all the Republican Party, if not all, in the national scene anyway, most of them, definitely in the Senate, and the vast majority of Democrats, quite frankly, not the vast, but the vast majority in both houses, like, they are very, very corrupted. They are better than Republicans on many issues, but they're not good enough, and they can be just as bad or worse depending on the issue. That's why we need progressives. And Bernie Sanders is running as a Democrat because the DNC and the RNC have a powerful apparatus, and they have all this data of how people vote and whether you should knock on their door and spend time and how you should target them. And it's a ton of expensive and long information, and nobody can compete with that. And if you don't run, quite frankly, in the Democratic or Republican Party, you won't get on the airwaves. I mean, do you know who your Green Party candidate is? Who's running for Green Party? What's going on in their primary? How does that work? Who's running for the Libertarian Party? You have no idea, most of you. And I mean, I had to look it up. So that's an issue, a major issue, and they should be allowed to debate. And the threshold should not be based on the polls that the parties pick, which are ABC, NBC, CNN, MSNBC, and colleges that they went to, fund, have relationships with. It should be independent, completely independent. It's not. So they control who gets on the stage and all of that stuff. But anyway, so Elizabeth Warren goes and she says, because she lost a ton of support because of that backstep on Medicare for all. It's extremely popular. At one point, over 50% of Republicans were for Medicare for all in this country, and something like 80% of Democrats, or 75%. I know that it was roughly 70 to 80% for a long time, about 3 to 5 months ago, and for about 3 or 5 months as well. About 80% of the American populace wanted Medicare for all, and it's still something like 68 to 70% consistently for years since Bernie Sanders has put this message out there. That's because 22 studies have shown that it saves money and it saves lives. They vary, but the recent Yale study, compiled with 2 other colleges, I forget the names of, and I apologize. It shouldn't just be, everybody refers to it as the Yale study, I guess, for brevity, and because one of the people in Yale helped run the study. I forget her name. But anyway, that poll says something like in the first year it would save Americans $450 billion, and it would save 68,000 lives because people are dying from being underinsured or having poor insurance, which is not going to the doctor because they can't cover the bills. This choice argument by the media and by Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden and pretty much everybody on the stage except Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, but I don't believe her on these issues, that issue. Neither did the voters, because as soon as she did that, it was such a popular program, especially in the Democratic Party. She said, "I'm done." They said, "I'm done," and she lost huge percent. And she began to attack Bernie Sanders, and really stab him in the back, especially if they're friends. And then she has a history of, she lied about being having Native American roots. She had such a small sliver. They did a DNA test. You could look up the numbers. It's some insanely small percent. And she said that she was not white with Native roots, but fully Native American on multiple forms. Multiple forms. Look it up. When she went to Harvard University, and when they asked, Harvard University asked her when she graduated if they could advertise her as the first woman graduate, first person of color to graduate from the school, she said yes. And it's just absurd. And a lot of people really want a woman, and they want Elizabeth Warren, now, especially now that Klobuchar's out, and Klobuchar was a joke and she's corrupt, but that's not even worth talking about at this point in time. But Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, quite frankly, is a better candidate for all Americans, and that includes women. He's more of a strong feminist. Look his record up. The media is pushing this narrative that Bernie Sanders hasn't passed any bills, and Elizabeth Warren is saying he can't get things done. It's funny, Elizabeth Warren, look at how she's getting walloped in the polls and is losing to Bernie Sanders currently statistically in the state of Massachusetts, where she is a senator, her home state. Just absurd, the things she's saying. But, Bernie Sanders actually got more bills, I think, passed in the House than like anybody that was in the House that was in the race, and a lot of other people. He got a lot of bills passed in the Senate. He got a lot of riders. 2 bills passed to save child health care for the Affordable Care Act. He added something like, I forget, it was over $1 billion. It was between $1 and like $2.5 billion added to the Affordable Care Act for like community hospitals and doctors for people in rural and underserved areas and poor areas, and it's still helping like I think the number is 9 million, but it's helping a lot of people. He has successfully worked with both parties, especially Republicans, to quite frankly to get things done, including John McCain, to get a very strong veteran affairs bill in to rehaul and reform the Veterans Affairs Office, and he would go further if he was given a serious president or Congress to work with, or was in a position of president to get people to know there's somebody behind him and to say, come on, get to the streets, demand that these people do the right thing. And that's what everybody's asking. Oh, well, how is Bernie Sanders going to pass Medicare for all in the Senate? People are going to get in the streets and they're going to protest. Bernie Sanders is telling you the truth. He never said, vote for me and I'll solve all your problems. What he said is, vote for me, and then fight. We need to fight, not me, us. He's the only one on the stage, including Donald Trump. He's the only presidential candidate in the major 2 parties that's saying that, you need a massive movement. You need a movement of people. And we really did not perform enough, and not enough people came out in 2016. And we need to get to Milwaukee and make sure democracy is upheld. If they're going to try to contest this convention, and steal it from the guy with the most votes, then everybody, regardless of who you believe in, even if it's Trump, everybody should be there protesting. So there's a big network of people that are getting ready to prepare for Milwaukee, whereas the DNC is holding their primary, their national convention. And there's a lot of people on Facebook, Twitter, all that other stuff, some of which I can help connect people to. There's people, I will be going myself, and so will some of my friends. There's people you can hitch a ride with. There's organizations and groups of people that might even go out of their way to help pick you up or help fund you. There's a lot. This is a really important thing, and we need to all stand together and demand democracy. Anyway, back to Elizabeth Warren's ridiculousness. There's that super PAC was supposedly funded by a bunch of women. Not that either way, there shouldn't be super PAC. She said it herself, so she's already a turncoat and a corporate shill. But nonetheless, and she's really hurting Bernie Sanders is the point. I'd leave her alone, but people with way more vote support, like Buttigieg and others, got behind their candidate, but she's not doing the same. She didn't back Bernie Sanders in 2016, even though he begged her to run and then only ran because she didn't. She is saying that her whole purpose of the campaign is to make it all the way to the convention, even if she gets barely any votes, no matter what happens, and that she could be that middle lane between the moderates, which are really conservative, the Joe Bidens, the Buttigieg's, the Klobuchars, the Steyers. They're more conservative. Actually, Steyer might be more progressive in reality than Warren claims to be, even though he's a billionaire. And well, whatever, we'll see. I hope Steyer likes Bernie as much as he says and gets out there and fights with him, because another issue, I'm sorry to keep going off on different things. This is my first video, and I had a long day trying to get the other video out there, and it didn't work out. I lost it, so thanks, YouTube. Well, thanks for allowing me to do this, but also thanks, not like sarcastically, for not having any way to call or anybody to live chat with and help me solve my problem, and ample hours wasted. Anyway, so, Bernie Sanders, there's just so many reasons to vote for Bernie Sanders. He's the only one on stage that said he believes the person with the most votes should win. We're in a democracy. I think that's a pretty easy statement. He has the most support. He's the best to beat Trump by far, statistically. I know people are telling you otherwise, but look at the numbers. All these other clowns are losing to Trump or tied with Trump all over the country, or barely beating him in states. Bernie Sanders has the best statistics to beat him. He's doing the best in the states that Clinton lost to Trump, where Trump, based on trade, and where Sanders is way stronger than any other candidates. I mean, all these other people are all beating their chests for war. They pass all, especially Warren loves just and Biden. They love war. Elizabeth Warren loves passing the first 2 military budgets for Donald Trump. Said, my brothers are in the military, so that means that apparently we should just fund the lunatics. this is the same person that's saying, he's dangerous, he shouldn't be in the presidency, and then let's give him like the strongest military and increase the budget of an already insanely bloated military by far, while she supposedly cares about these issues like climate change or Medicare for all or just more equality. So it's a nonsense. And Bernie Sanders is the only candidate on stage that has a sufficient Green Party platform. I mean, excuse me. Well, it is a Green Party platform, but he's the only one that has a Green New Deal, quite frankly, that is sufficient to save our fucking planet. Excuse my language, but I mean, come on here. Now, Bernie Sanders' plan is up here. And the next highest is Elizabeth Warren. Now, this is a $16.4 trillion plan, Bernie Sanders' plan, which includes housing, very intelligent things. He went to activists and scientists and people in communities and found out what their problems were. He's going to save us from ourselves and all the pollution and damage we've allowed for so long. And on top of that, he's going to provide housing. Like I believe the number he's been using is 10 million units of housing, which so many communities desperately need. It would actually lower the cost for people who do pay rent, so they wouldn't pay so much rent. This narrative that they're all going to be but we're human beings. Everybody's a human being and needs a place to live. And but anyway, so there's a lot of great things in the Green New Deal you should check out. Warren's is 2.4 trillion. So let me repeat that: 16.4 trillion. I believe Warren's plan was 2.3 trillion, unless she's changed that. If anything, it's gone lower. I believe it might even be lower than that. She's the next highest candidate. Below that is Biden, which is like below the screen, and that's at $800 million or 800 billion. Excuse me, $800 billion. I don't know if you noticed, but over 1 billion species of animals were killed in the fire. Plenty of firemen from Australia, firemen from the United States of America going over to help. And I'm sure firemen, that was a while. The numbers are of people dead, of homes ravaged. The cost is going to be astronomical, just astronomical. And the human toll and the loss of people's homes and their, effects and things that matter to them and their music or recordings or writings or computers with all of their stuff on it for years, all gone, and Paradise, California was on fire. This is serious, and Bernie Sanders is the only one who has a policy to address this. I just encourage everybody to get out there and vote. If anybody out there is watching this video and likes it, this is my first video, and like I said, I've had like a 5-hour or 6-hour delay. I put out over an hour video. I'm gonna end this soon. It's unfortunate. The intent was to do my first video on a big day, and it was supposed to be early so people could see it and share it, and it could have some impact. So I'm going to bring this to an end and to a close. I hope people see it. If anybody out there can help me be like Secular Talk or the Rational National, the Jimmy Dore Show, or the Humanist Report, and Tim Black and the Wolf Pack. What does he call himself? TV. That's a pretty interesting show sometimes. You should check him out. Trying to give shout outs to people that are inspiring and are helping send an honest message and battle the corporate media narrative. Anyway, the point is that they all are like professional about this, and they got like little backgrounds and stuff with cool stuff. Most of them with screens because they're all fancy. I don't have a Patreon account set up yet, but that's how they make money, so they can actually afford to eat and live off of doing this. And I would like to do that as well. I study political science and history. And I've been studying formally and informally my whole life, politics and history and other things, but definitely those are where I got my degrees in, and those are my focus. But nonetheless, and I've been fighting, and I've been an activist and a musician and writes like politically inspired and socially inspired, driven, and environmental music and stuff, and things that touch on important issues, economic issues, stuff like that. But anyway, the point is that I don't know how to make things pop up on the screen. I was gonna like do something really terrible in my first video and show you like articles on my phone, like in my hand. I'm looking for it, but you get the point. I need to learn how to set up a Patreon account, how to like maybe link this YouTube channel to Twitter and Facebook, so maybe I could just post and it all goes out to a bunch of different mediums, other things I didn't mention, LinkedIn, and a bunch of stuff I don't use. I need help, maybe figuring out how to get money from YouTube and monetize the account, so maybe I can get a little money and Anyway, the point is that's not what this is about. I'll do this for free. I've made videos in the past. I'm all over social media, sharing videos and talking about things with people. I care deeply about these issues, and that's why I'm here to try to give some independent analysis and some fair analysis. And I know it sounds like, oh, this guy's just, if you're not a Sanders supporter, you go, oh, no, this is the truth. I have plenty of data to back up my beliefs and plenty of things that people aren't aware of. And if you're watching MSNBC, CNN, or Fox, like or ABC or CBS or Bloomberg, especially Bloomberg, like any of those, you're not going to get the true story. You have to be discerning. You have to use analysis. You have to read between the lines in articles. You have to realize when an article is totally full of crap and not giving you proper sources. The polls consistently underperform Sanders, but since all the Democratic Party is throwing all this power against Bernie Sanders, including his supposed ally Elizabeth Warren, who is really just stealing a ton of delegates and momentum from him, which is really just embarrassing. She just has done so poorly, and she clearly doesn't care about progressive issues. Apparently Pete Buttigieg and Klobuchar were willing to give up their position, although I think it's funny. You could argue that maybe either one of them would have been a better candidate than Joe Biden for a ton of reasons. But it is funny that they're picking a candidate who is, and I say this without he has family, friends. I'm not trying to be insulting. He's clearly senile, or he's becoming senile. He has mental issues. Guy makes a lot of gas, and the media doesn't really cover it very well. He's gone on and said weird things about kids. Kids. I just want to illustrate because I have a lot of leg hair, and it's funny. Kids all around him rubbing his leg hair. Little children, there was like black kids around him. He was saying stuff like roaches, they're roaches, and almost sounded like it might be racist, but it was so crazy. Nobody could, all the things he said, if you listen to that speech, were just, nobody knew what he was talking about. He's made a lot of gaffes. He's had some tragedy in his life. That is true. He's done a lot of horrible things before those tragedies occurred, but the guy's had some tragedy. I think his first wife died. I know his son died of cancer, I believe. More recently, or not, I think it was before he became vice president in 2008 or while he was vice president. I'm not exactly sure when it happened, but it was a thing. It was a serious thing. He talks about it, and it makes you get all verklempt and, emotional, and oh my God, you feel for the guy. And then he just goes out and starts bashing Sanders and lying about him and lying about his own record. He's just so disingenuous. He's lied so many times. The guy's gone on the record saying he'll take money from anybody. He'll do whatever they say. There's tons of videos to show that, he's talking about cutting Medicare and Medicaid. Biden is just awful. And he doesn't, whatever. It's just absolutely awful. So we need to make these primaries in the future more democratic, open them up, allow anybody to vote. There's a ton of things wrong with our system that make it set up to be an unfair advantage to people in power and people with money, and not the people, not the actual people, us. So anyway, if anybody wants to help me and show me how to put up those videos, or anybody wants to get involved in the cause and do some research and really build a strong channel, or just, has any tips, advice, and hopefully, if you guys enjoyed this video, you share it with everybody, Again, this was my first video, and I was nervous in the first place, and I lost a lot of time. So hopefully this video better be getting out to you right now. So I'm going to shut up, but this is John Smith with Punk Rock Politics. Please share and comment on the video. And I hope to build a channel. I hope to build a fan base. I hope to start a conversation, and that would be good enough. But if anybody wants to help out in any way or is interested, reach out to me on my channel, and we'll talk further, and we'll get in touch. All right. Thank you so much to all of you out there who hopefully will be seeing this video, and don't let them cheat democracy again. Thanks.